Welcome back to our live coverage of the DC Summit here in the Expo Hall. I'm A.M. Grabelny, Solution Architect. You've seen me all day, you know me. I'm here with my friend and co-host Brian. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am your friendly neighborhood CloudFormation DA.
All right, and we got Niraj too at the end. Tell us.
Hello everyone, my name is Dhiraj Mahapatra, and I'm the Principal Serverless Specialist SA. Happy to be here, happy to talk to you, Brian and Aim. And let's see what we have more to talk about in Step Functions.
We're talking Step Functions and the studio too, right? Workflow Studio.
Workflow Studio.
We're talking some good stuff today.
Yeah. So, what questions do you have?
What is Step Function?
Yeah, that's a great first question, Brian. I love it.
That's a very good question. What is Step Functions? So, whenever you see that when you're building something and you have to do with multiple services, when you have to work with multiple services and your sequence of logic has to be predetermined and you have to know what you have to interact with. That is where you kind of figure out whether I should be building it in a Lambda function or should I be looking at something else. Other indicators are if you have to manage state inside your logic, code logic, then you think about, hey, should I still use Lambda functions or jump onto Step Functions? One other good indication is if you have some human intervention that is required while you're writing code. That's where Step Functions would be a good indicator. The other one says if you have workflow patterns where you have to deal with decision trees or branching logics or kind of parallel processing or iteration, that is where you might want to use Step Functions. So Step Functions is for addressing all those queries. Now, going forward, what are the common architecture patterns that you see is like if you have to have one task executed after the another, or you have to have a failed task and that want to retry. If you have to build it yourself, then you have to manually build those boilerplate code as to retry, try-catch blocks, and you have to make sure that you maintain that, which takes away the time for you to write business logic.
Right.
That's why Step Functions provides you this nice little platform where you can build using tasks like this. You can run states, choice states, or try-catch finally. So yeah, that's where Step Functions are very useful.
Very cool, very cool.
And
Now, Studio, are we getting to Studio now, or are we still doing, we're still on Step Functions,
yeah,
sorry.
Step Functions has Workflow Studio, and that's a very new addition in Step Functions. Last year, we used to write Step Functions using ASL, we still do, but once you start writing ASLs, it becomes a little bit cumbersome as to how and what integrations that are available. One good way to start with, if you start building with Step Function, is to use Workflow Studios. And we can jump right in as to show an example as to how we can use Workflow Studios to build a small workflow. I'm in AWS console, and I'm inside Step Functions. When you go to Step Functions, it allows you to get started with. So if you're in state machines, the first thing you'll see is create a state machine, and then you click this button. Now you'll see something new, that is you can design using Workflow Studio, and you can visually start building your state machine. There are two different types of state machine, but normally you can start with standard, and then you figure out which one to use based on your use case.
Yeah.
When you start with the standard, you right away land on this landing page where you can drag and drop and build a lot of workflow orchestrations. So in the left, you see easily that there are different services that are most popular and also categorized based on compute or database. And once you dive into one of the compute service, you'll see all of the API actions that are available. So one of the most common we had was AWS Lambda invoke. So I can drag and drop AWS Lambda. That means I have a state machine with one Lambda function that I can invoke.
Right.
It's not limited to Lambda, it can do a lot more. I can publish a message to SNS. I can start another state machine execution right away inside Step Functions. So right now, we'll just, as a simple example, what we'll see is how can we detect sentiment of a particular text once it is passed. Now we have Comprehend, which provides detect sentiment API, so I can quickly type detect sentiment, and I get detect sentiment API call. I know what should be my language. I'm relying on English, and I'm expecting a parameter to come to this state machine in the form of comment. Okay? Now I can go next. At the same time, if you see here, I did all of this in the form, but right away my definition got updated. This definition is the important part of our AWS Step Function. Now you can export this definition, go to your IDEs, and you can start playing with how you want to build your workflow. Or you can fully build your workflow in Workflow Studio and then export the state machine and plug in whatever you need.
Yeah, Jirash, I think you're going to show us a little later of how this actually builds into developer productivity, workflows,
Yes,
IDEs,
yes,
things like
yes.
that.
So in this case, I just want to show if I want to run this, I can directly go from console, I can create next. I can name my state machine as, let's say, detect sentiment state machine.
Right.
I can choose a role saying the state machine has to use a role which gives it access to call detect sentiment API. So I have a role, and that's it. I created my state machine. Now I can start executing. When you start executing, it says you can send a text. I can say, I am here at DC Summit, and I am very happy. Okay. So I start execution. It takes time to execute, and we should see a green. So this visual indicator of a state machine gives you right away how and what state your task is right now. So I can see I passed in my comment as a parameter. The language code was used as English. Now I have a score coming back from detect sentiment, and the score is 97% neutral.
Yeah.
So now imagine how you can grow with this, and you can build so many different tasks inside your state machine, and then you can export. Now in case we want to export this, let's say I want to export this state machine. Here is my execution. I can copy it over to my directory, or I can directly go here. While I'm building the state machine, I can export the definition as JSON or YAML. Now once I export, I can open that in my IDE. So let's say if I open in my IDE.
Jirash, I just wanted to point out too here, you didn't write any code.
Yeah.
You
I didn't
wrote
write
no
any
code here to do this. And normally you could do this from a Lambda function, just calling out using one of the SDKs.
Yep.
But then you maintain that code.
Yes.
Every line of code that we write
Yes,
becomes
exactly.
maintenance.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
That's a really good point.
every line that I don't have to write
Yeah.
is wonderful.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the benefit for me for this is like the quick prototyping. You were
Yes.
able to quickly
Exactly.
drag and drop a prototype and have it functioning before you wrote any code.
Exactly. So for me personally, my experience is when I talk to customers, when I try to explain them how to break down monolithic Lambda functions to smaller, while I talk to them, I build this in the background, I show them, this is what you want? And they say, yes, exactly, this is what I want.
Yeah.
So then here, let's introduce you to Step Functions. So once you get the ASL, you post it here, and then you have to deal with the SAM template or CDK and start working with that. So that becomes your developer.
But what's interesting, not only are you not writing those lines of code, you're also not then maintaining the SDK versions.
Yes.
You're not
exactly.
having dependency management issues.
Exactly.
You don't have any of that responsibility
That's true.
left anymore.
That's
That's
true.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's for something as simple as just calling an API, which should be very simple, but often becomes very complicated when
Yes.
it
Normally,
uses the library.
there was a recent blog that I wrote on orchestrating S3 specific actions.
Yeah.
Normally, you would write a AWS CLI to do object retrieval from Glacier, but the blog talks about how you can do that using step functions and build an entire application based on a business use case. So
Wow.
that's cool.
Wow.
The other questions which I hear normally is about how step functions compares with SSM automation.
Oh yeah, Brian, you were talking about this with me earlier.
So
Yeah.
a quick comparison means it's if the use cases you can see right here. If you're looking at long-running serverless or short-lived orchestration of workflow, step functions, you can use microservices as well because step functions express sync workflow integrates with your API gateway, which means once you have written those microservices broken down into smaller tasks, you can have an API gateway in front of it. Comparatively, in the SSM Runbook, you can definitely do maintenance, deployment, and remediation tasks. Other comparisons, yes, you can do cross-region, cross-account in step functions using API gateway. You can also do human intervention like you would do in SSM automation using step functions. Invocation rate is relatively higher in step functions compared to SSM, and the maximum duration of your state execution stays for 365 days for standard workflow and 5 minutes for express workflow.
365?
Yep.
Wow.
So if you think of a long-running task and you want that task to wait, and then standard Step Functions provides you that feature.
Wow.
That being said, it's not like you cannot use one with the other.
Yeah, they often are
Yes.
used together.
We have a business, we have a blog which showcases that how you can use Step Function, which invokes SSM automation and vice versa.
Oh, wow.
So I can reach out to me. I'll send you the link to the blog. I'll tweet about it so you can have the information. So overall, what we saw, we built state machines using Workflow Studio. We built using ASL. We had states and steps, and we orchestrated. The simplest orchestration, what we did was detect sentiment, which is something like this, where you have AWS SDK integration. And we used Workflow Studio like this, where we just created the detect sentiment as one of the tasks and executed it right away.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent.
in order to learn more, tomorrow I'm talking in detail about this for 1 more hour, about
okay.
Step Functions. So you can, if you are here in DC Summit, please join us in SVS 304. You'll get a deeper dive on AWS Step Functions.
One more question for me.
Yep.
So how can I get my hands on this code? Is it open source somewhere? Are you having a blog?
We do have AWS samples,
Okay.
and we have specific AWS Step Function samples under AWS samples. So you can go and play around with those samples and try to work with it. A good way to start with is just open the Workflow Studio and play around what is possible with you, with your workflow. You can drag any API action and try to see how it works. That way, you'll learn more.
Yeah, I think that's one of the highlights there, right? Is
Yes.
that you can actually start getting, or get started, right, with just exploring what can I do.
Exactly.
I think that's just that catalog of,
Yeah.
of API calls.
Yeah. And the one thing which I did not touch about is we saw how the form was present. There were different tabs which talks about how you can handle input and output,
Oh yeah.
and mainly how you can
Validation,
and mainly how you can do error handling.
That was the try catch.
Yeah,
Binary
yeah.
block. That
So your error handling in this workflow is pretty natively supported by State Machine in the Workflow Studio. So all of your best practices are getting inbuilt while you drag and drop and start working on your workflow orchestrator.
Super cool.
Daraj, thank you
Thank you
for coming on. That's wonderful. Go check out Daraj's session if you're here.
Yeah.
Go check out those resources also that Daraj mentioned, and stay tuned for more
Yes.
with us here at the AWS Summit in DC. We'll be right back.